Welcome to Spotlight, the podcast that puts the spotlight on life in Manila and everything that comes with it. This week we have Manolo Quezon and Clinton Palanca.
Hello.
Along with Gang Badoy.
Yes, that's me.
Who's been visiting the National Penitentiary for 9 years as part of an outreach program with her foundation, Rock Ed Philippines. So we've been hearing a lot of crazy news about the prison for a while now, like for example, flat screen TVs and PS4s. So I suppose my first question is, what is it really like?
Inside?
Yes.
Well, that's a broad question.
Maybe if you walked us through.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think very many people are not aware that a prison is different from jail. Mm-hmm. Jail is actually where you're still awaiting trial, you're not quite convicted yet, yung unang arrest sa'yo sa jail yan, detention center and then jail. Yeah. If you're in prison, that means na-convict ka na. So that's a big difference. Because I think iba yung rights na or something ng inmates, di ba, inside. And if you know that, you also know that the energy inside is different. Jail has like this anticipation pa. Some of them can still be acquitted. So there's a different energy of restlessness inside jails. You feel it if you go to, and then when you go to prison, a lot of them already know how long they're gonna be there for, 8 years, 8 to 12 years, ready for parole in 5, ganyan. So, parang medyo mas relax yung nasa prison kasi naka 5 to 8 years na sila sa city jail or provincial jail, whichever, wherever sila unang na-arrest. So, if you've seen movies, whatever your impressions are of prison, medyo ibang-iba yung sa maximum security prison. It will really surprise you if you go inside. When you enter, some of you are familiar with the facade,
Mm-hmm. That looks like a White Castle.
Oo, yung mukhang White Castle na parang, di ba, parang
looks very
parang
clean
Monty Python
and,
setup. Parang siyang set design actually. There's a facade, and then as soon as you enter, there will be very heavy gates that they're actually rather beautiful if you're into architecture. The gates have been there, I think, since the 20s, so they're medyo Art Deco. Bigat ng gate, and then there's 3 gates before you actually get inside. So there's a first gate where you leave your ID. There's a second gate where they they tap you down all over, and if you
visualize it, is it something like what we see in movies about, because it's of the same era, something like Alcatraz and
yes,
and
actually
sort
you're
of like
right.
that?
Because you're the historian, so you know that it was built before the war, so it's 20s.
Because there's an interesting thing. I mean, we forget that. It's called New Bilibid Prison.
And it's no longer
and
new.
it's 80 years old.
Because there's an old Bilibid Prison.
There's an
There
old
is
Bilibid
an
Prison.
old Bilibid
And I
prison.
think just to add context to what Gang is walking us through, these were, the old Bilibid Prison is in Manila, and in fact the compound is still there. If you look on Google Earth, you can see it. And it was basically built by, at the end of the 19th century, as one of the most modern, really scientific prisons. Imagine sort of the spoke of a wheel and the different block houses radiate from that. And I think, Clinton, when we're talking, there's a name for that.
The panopticon.
Well, what does that mean?
It was, I don't know if it was invented or popularized by Jeremy Bentham. And so you have the guard in the center of the prison, and then everyone else around them in a circle, and so the guard can see everyone
all the time.
I don't know if you can picture it now, but if you're familiar with Hopia, I love Hopia, by the way. There's this central part which is a spoke, like yung sa gitna, yun yung may guard doon at may tower. And then radiating from that are like spokes, and those are the buildings, actually, the dormitories. So they look like, if you can picture it, it looks like an asterisk. And from above, it's like, there's a cross, which are the main division, so quartered siya. So I think you can picture it. Yeah. And then the lines that you see from aerial view, if you Google Earth it, those are dormitories. Those are the buildings, building 1 to 12.
So Old Bilibid, by the early 1930s, was
modern.
No, it was no longer modern. I mean, had been modern in the 19th century. It was overcrowded. It was in the middle of town. It was considered a threat and inhumane. And so the decision was made. Actually, it was my grandfather who decided that, you have to move it out of the middle of Manila to the middle of nowhere. And the middle of nowhere in
At that time,
1936 was Alabang.
Was Alabang, yeah.
And in fact, it was a very big controversy because why are you spending so much money? And then, so they built this thing, which in contrast to this 19th century building was like Alcatraz with the big barred cells and the different sort of blocks. Instead of a wheel, you imagine blocks that are now self-contained, because the idea is you can sort of isolate a group of prisoners if something goes wrong. And it was built for the staggeringly huge population of a maximum of something like 3,000 to 4,000 prisoners. Fast forward 80 years from there, and nothing has changed.
Yeah, structurally nothing has changed.
But now the population is
14,000 approximately.
So it's a 200 or 300%.
There's a new dorm, Building 14. That's the one that Secretary De Lima recently built for the high-profile, high-risk ones. That's closer to the administrative building. So Building 14, if you're hearing that in the news lately, that's where the stabbing happened actually recently. That's a new building. More modern, etc. Because there's only 12 inside.
So it's so now you're entering this kind of very fortress-like environment.
Yes.
These are people who know that they're stuck there
For X number of years, yeah.
And I guess the first question we should ask is, before we even get to the prisoners, if we know there's 14,000 there, how many people are in charge of keeping them?
You mean guards?
Yes.
The Bureau of Corrections? Well, last statistics I got from a deputy director for reform. His name is Martin Perfecto. It's pinakamarami na at a time is 420 guards.
At
and now
one time.
At one time. And it's a little lower now because they mixed up, sorry, what do you call this? They rotated the guards and replaced with the special armed force. What are they called?
The SAF.
What are they called?
Special Action Force.
Special Action Force.
Of the PNP.
Of the PNP. So, mas konti pa yan. So, but, you have to understand, even since 2007 till now, I would always observe the guards. Of course, they're the first contact when you're right there, right? So, I noticed very few of them are may siren pa yan, no? Very few of them are physically fit, as you'd expect a prison guard would be.
So
diba?
it's not like the movies where there are these big
my gosh, mas malaki
bouncer
pa katawan
types.
ng bouncer ng Palace Pool Club kaysa sa Bilibid eh. Parang those bouncers in clubs, parang you would imagine ganun ang itsura ng prison guard kasi sa movies, ganun. But when you enter the run-of-the-mill normal, those who applied for them, they're not mostly physically fit. I'm sure meron, but I didn't spot too many. And they're just more trained to, I feel like they were just trained to be stern and not decisive or incisive or critical thinking so much. I'm sorry, am I generalizing? But parang the number one order for them is be stern. That's all. Don't go inside.
And are they stern?
It's easy to it's easy to assume that kulang yung training for psychological preparedness to impose discipline on whoever visiting, people who are visiting or people who are inside, who are inmates. I imagine it takes some sort of psych preparation to actually be a prison guard. Right? Maging preschool teacher nga lang, parang you need to be prepared eh.
But are they stern? Are they in charge?
Are they stern?
Are they in charge?
I'm going to incriminate myself. Yes, they are stern, but when you're female and you're always smiling, sometimes you can get away with, please, pwede ko ba ipasok yung donuts kasi may merienda sa loob or birthday ng isa kong estudyante, or pwede ka makiusap. And that's not, by the way, a gender thing, ha? It's not because I'm a girl and they're guys, ha? It's a Filipino culture thing. It's really, pakiintindi na pwede ko bang ipasok yung Krispy Kreme kasi birthday po ng pinakamatanda kong estudyante, pangalan niya Gaspar. But, they're very hard people eh. Very hard.
I think
yung sternness parang flies out the door when you bring up something like birthday kasi ni Gaspar, 72 na siya, ganyan or something.
But gang, it's so you have a very small guard population supervising a very large prison population in facilities that were I would think ideally it was supposed to be 1 or 2 prisoners a cell, and now it's a dozen or more.
Absolutely.
in a cell. So even the place is not designed to keep order. I mean, everyone is...
You're absolutely right. I'm glad you asked that kasi it begs the question. It begs for me to bring up the existence of gangs inside.
Okay, so walk us through how it's organized.
It's so funny, no? Again, I go back to our impressions of movies. When we see prisons and gangs are always bad, you know? I mean, automatic. Kasi if they're not bad, they're usually just called groups or groups of friends, you know? So the connotation of the word gang, which apparently is my name, that's fine.
And it got you into trouble in Facebook.
It did get me into trouble.
Facebook kept deleting her account.
Yeah, I know.
Because they thought she was a gang.
I was a gang, I know. But gang came from Panggap because we're Visayan. So anyway, it's not about me. Basta, gangs. It brings to light the existence of gangs. They are not there frivolously, by the way. I think gangs started to exist out of sheer necessity, anthropological response talaga to, because everybody who's there has a personality trait, meaning they went over some edge at nahuli sila. Assuming that they're guilty. The innocent, kawawa, diba? I wish we didn't have that to discuss, but there are also innocent people in jail, believe it or not. Natural instinct yata ng man I say man in general terms, ng humans ay sumali sa tribe. Parang kailangan may kasama kang tribe, especially in such an environment, like a hostile environment. So I also think the rise of gangs inside jail is so necessary for peace and order that even the Bureau of Corrections, they're not actively stopping it. Okay, that's a nice way of saying they're encouraging it. I don't think they're encouraging it. They exist. Gangs exist. So they are not, I think the Bureau also is not aggressive in stopping the gangs from existing. Yes. I think that's the safest way to put it. Why? Because if you have 22 gangs inside the maximum security prison, these are 22 collectives of Genuine Ilocano, Batang Cebu, Batang City Jail, Sputnik, Commando, all sorts of, you know, they name themselves. Then you have 22 leaders. 22 leaders in charge of whatever numbers. Commando is mas konti, Batang City Jail marami, Genuine Ilocano, konti lang, Batang Cebu 45, may iba pang version. They usually gather by region kasi yung dialect, yung language. So, may leaders na 22. For example, JB Sebastian is Commando. My understanding is Commando, pero lumalabas Sputnik siya. And then Colango is, I think, Sputnik. Halos Hos, Congressman Halos Hos at the time was the head of Batang City Jail, which is one of the biggest. So if I'm a warden or the director, I only have to deal with 92 people. Kung may magsaksakan sa basketball, tapos under Commando sila or Sputnik, I can just talk to the two leaders and say, uy, inyo yan. Ang gulo ng area mo, hindi ka ba magaling na leader? So, alam mo, Clinton and Manolo, so funny, they actually have parang their own justice system inside. Sometimes they have discipline. Kung merong nag-complain, nagsuntukan sa basketball, it's the lead. Okay, in this case, I've witnessed Halos Hos who will say, okay, so for 2 days, isolated ka or you can't attend the classes you signed up for. Yeah, they have some
He's the one who will decide
At the time, I did hear, but here he has
again, so walk us through. You were doing your outreach program in Bilibid for
2007. I remember the first day, July 7, 2007.
Up to,
well, we lost our permit in July when the SAF came in. So,
July 2016. So that's
that's roughly 9
okay.
years.
So describe the changes, because what you're describing to us is okay. There are these gangs.
Cells,
there are leaders. The leaders, in a sense, to maintain their own power, enforce discipline, and also for a practical use are the ones that are dealt with by the prison authorities.
Yes.
But there must be regime changes over time.
Yes, and I've seen a few. Okay, in Bilibid, kung nagtuturo ka doon, you know the concept of tinikling, yung may dalawang bamboo, okay? Sa Bilibid parang singkil, 4. 4 yung bamboo. Minsan nagiging 16 yung bamboo. So your dance is different. Why? because they change leadership a lot. The directors change a lot. They're usually military men or police who are about to retire, and it's like an appointment for reward or something. So a lot of them stay for 3 years lang. Grabe yung turnover, sobrang bilis.
And your mentality, if you're that sort of official, is I just don't want gulo.
I just don't
right?
want gulo. Yeah. So as is where is, parang ganon. A lot of them, to be very, very fair, really in the first 6 months, parang they're very enthused and they really try to change things because every new director or every new deputy director, I need to change my permit. We need to reapply for permits. There will be a new arrangement of gates. So sometimes nung time ni Pangilinan, ang gate na pinapasukan namin, gate 1 kasi mas madali. Nung naging si Bukayo, biglang gate 3. And then paiba-iba. And then normally dito ang religious volunteers, dito ang academic volunteers, dito ang DepEd, dito ang gate. Minsan dito ang labas, minsan doon. So kami rin, we also have to dance with the change of leadership, which is so often. So minsan sobrang strict kahit sanitary napkin mo sa bag, kahit powder mo, ipapaiwan. Minsan naman sobrang lax na nakakalusot maski cellphone ko. One time, nakalimutan ako kapkapan, pumasok ako. Even I got nervous na I had my cellphone inside kasi parang, hindi ako binantayan. But it's so, there's no system really in place. I think whoever comes in, I guess it's the same for the Philippines sometimes. Yeah, it depends who the cabinet secretary is and all of a sudden, bago yung poster no how to wash your hands. Di ba yung mga DOH, pareho lang naman mag-wash ng hands every time. Pero pag iba yung leadership, iba yung logo, iba yung whatever. So it's the same in Bilibid. Change of regime. So I was just discussing the Bucor change in regime. Now I want to discuss, if I'm free to discuss, what's the word? The more prominent inmates. Okay, usually that means they're wealthier or more franchised. They're not the disenfranchised. Is it okay to name names? Kasi public record naman that they're in jail. Okay, so for example, at the time, Hubert Webb, he's not a leader of a gang, but he has a group that's around him, I think. He's part of a gang, but he has a group of inmates na, alam mo, parang fans rin niya. And then, nagiging tao niya, quote-unquote. And they help him. They cook for him. They sometimes do his laundry. He also takes care of them. Pag merong may sakit, etc. Si Halosos, ganun din. Meron nagluluto for him. May runner ng, I don't know, whatever, paabot ng may dyaryo ba ngayon or something. May ganun. And then there is, I never encountered them up close, but I know Congressman Leviste has also a group around him. And Mayor Sanchez naturally. They're natural leaders din I guess
they know how to interact with people and how to handle people on a
and
level.
Some of my students, if I ask them, they will really say, ako kay Halosos ako ako kay Hubert ako kay ganyan. Parang it's almost comforting to them that they belong to someone who is their lead, padron, or just confident sila gumalaw, magkasakit kasi nandyan si Congressman Halosos, nandyan si Kong. In fact, on a lighter note, Congressman Halosos even has a pedicab inside that has the license plate 8 inside. Kasi he's a heavy-set man, and sometimes he doesn't feel like walking to his tennis game. It's really interesting. And then there's also a convicted of Maureen Holtman's murder, T. Hanky, who is now was released. I heard. I think he's released. Yeah. And there also is a Panlilio inside. I think he was convicted of murder, allegedly, his cousin, etc. I don't know about the real story, but these are people who are in place.
It's like something out of Victor Hugo, that you have these well-connected people who are used to being
served,
being served, and how to maintain loyalty and.
Yes, they take care of people.
Really. Yeah, and I mean, that's why you have a congressman or something doing well, because that's what he's been doing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, bukod doon, we don't have, I know this is so cliche, pero we don't have money, we don't have resources enough to provide equal cell space, parehong outfit, orange.
Tell us a little about the conditions, how many to a cell, what do they eat?
Okay, just so that I can put myself in real proper context because I can't speak for the entire place, but I know Building 4 very well because that's where most of my students are from. Building 4, pag umakyat ka, it's a long, like the long spokes, a long
First of all,
building.
what kind of prisoners are kept in Building 4?
Building 4, you're pretty much run-of-the-mill 12 to 20 lifers, you know, because Building 1 is heinous crimes. Just so you know, Building 1 used to be the building they call Bitay because that used to be the death sentence built. That's death row, exactly. So yan yung multiple kidnap for ransom, triple homicide, etc. Yung Building 4, just to give you an overview, the people who were in Building 4, that's why I'm assigned there, kind of. I have friends from college who are inmates in Building 4. They were frat boys at the time, now they are men. They were tried and convicted of, like during a frat fight, somebody died. So they're there. So they are friends I know from UP Diliman. 2 of them are from UP Manila. In fact, most of them are my batch. In fact, one of them was number 1 in the Civil Engineering Board of the year we graduated. So they were accused of the beach house death. Remember, there was a fight between 2 frats. One is Sigma Rho and the other is Scintilla Juris. That's them. So I know them. It's Building 4. When you enter, it's really celda like you picture. Naka-box, so may bars in between. Pero a lot of them covered it up with plywood para mukha siyang house. So you don't see the bars from inside. You see the bars outside. So they box themselves in and they start painting or putting posters or it's a very tiny space. Even if these UP boys are allegedly more privileged, they have more money, they're more respected inside kasi hindi naman sila magulo, and everybody knows the crime they're accused of. It's a rather high profile one. So there were kids, they're frat kids who just was into a fight and someone happened to die. I'm baffled that they're there longer than Halos Hos was. I'm baffled that the frat kids who were accused of mga hazing and stuff, mas matagal pa sila sa nagpatay kay Haltman inside. So I don't know. That's not the main issue. So when you go inside, they try to decorate it as best they can na mukhang bahay. So posters are up.
And
so a Christmas tree is
what you're describing is again something like, if you remember, have you watched Quill?
Well, no.
The movie. Anyway, it's about the Marquis de Sade. But in the 17th century, the style they had was, if you're a rich prisoner, you're thrown in jail, but you can have food brought in, and you can have your books.
Parang sa mga Godfather movies or Goodfellas.
So that seems to be the part where our society is tolerant, that if you have the resources to get a hamper or a poster or a piece of plywood, or is it all transacted within the prison?
I'm glad you asked because if we had enough resources, we will be able to provide the United Nations standard for cells, which is I think 10 feet by 5. That's considered humane, parang ganun. And then we will have enough. Everybody just has 4 orange jumpsuits, 5 t-shirts, medyas and all, so everybody has that. Everybody will have a tray of their own and they line up and get their scooped into the same food. If we had the resources, then they will feel the nakakatawa nga to use this word, the equality of the sentence.
And so the ones who are at the bottom of the food, at the bottom of the hierarchy, do you get to meet them?
I'm sorry?
The ones at the bottom of the hierarchy.
Oh, of course. Most of them are my students, actually, because
and they don't have these privileges.
No privileges. So what happens? Gosh, I'm going to be risking saying this, but because our resources are so wanting in training, expertise, resources, literal resources like space to begin with, and bars, and possibly closed circuit TVs, and etc. Because we're so wanting, we need the gangs for peace and order. We need the leadership para we don't have to deal with 14,000.
And the prisoners themselves need an underground economy to maintain what should have been a basic level of
Absolutely.
living.
I have witnessed one of my students, his name is Gaspar. He got very sick one time and his gangmates, Batang City Jail, they were the ones who pulled in resources to get his medicine kasi walang medicine for his specific pneumonia in the infirmary. I have one student para lang my stories, his name was Ronnie. I hope he doesn't mind I'm saying this. His name's Ronnie, and he's one of the smartest. I believe he was a law student when he was accused of parricide, I think, of his wife. He claims innocence, of course, but he was there. So he's one of my smarter writers. So parang mas nakakausap ko siya more than the other students. One day he was so excited, this was in 2012, and he told me, I'll be released soon. My parole papers came through. And can I get a job with you, or etc. So I'm a bit anxious, but I was also excited for him, naturally. But I've never had a student released before. So that was new. I didn't consider that. And then I came back the following week and they said, Ma'am, si Ronnie nasa Ward 4. Ward 4 is what they call the psychiatric ward. That's where they have nervous breakdowns, and dito yung psych ward talaga. Yung makikita mo yung medyo catatonic, drooling, violent, screaming. Yan yung psych ward nila. So oh, ano nangyari? Bakit siya na Ward 4? And this is Ronnie. You know, Ronnie's a law student, very smart, very polite, very... Ma'am, kasi yung release papers niya, nagkamali, kapangalan lang pala niya. It wasn't him that who was going to be released. And you know, that clerical error, that inefficiency of identifying your prisoner number and your inmate number, it broke him, literally, lost his mind. Okay, I say this freely because I visited him and I saw him. He was gone. He left ankle literally chained. They have chains. You know those chains na parang sa cartoons that's around your ankle and then it's attached to, I don't know, some hook on the floor? Nakaganon siya. Kasi he was violent.
Gang, this brings up an interesting point because, okay, you've looked at the society, you've looked even at the economy. I mean, that's why you can get plywood, because I'm sure there's a long story of to earn that piece of plywood.
Yeah.
It's a whole series of favors and that sort of thing. Okay. But now that brings up the question of the mental health and characteristics of the population. I mean, wherever you cram people together, first of all, there's stress. Second of all,
and the kind of people.
And then the whole, you know, this is not this is not the Sweden. I mean, this is they're governed by fear, intimidation, bribery, or whatever. So,
absolutely.
what is it? How many people are there, maybe, first of all, because they flipped out? And how many people are flipping out once they're there?
Of course, I have no numbers, but Filipinos are amazing. You know, we're so resilient, and we really try to find joy wherever we are in the worst situations. I have witnessed inmates who look far more joyful than half of my friends who are free and who have no resource problems whatsoever. So, and may I mind map? I think the inmates who are happy that I've seen inside, and I don't use the term freely happy, they really are. I think these are the ones who, as children, were really nasa street, never parented, never had a schedule, never had order. Kasi tulog sila wherever night caught them, you know, and they had a different rhythm, extremely different rhythm from childhood, you know, from the childhood that we know. These are Filipinos. These are Filipinos who, ano ba tawag dito? Kasi, I'll explain this. When I make them write, I used to hesitate to make them read in front, in class. Kasi, najahay ako na baka ayaw nila mag-recite, ayaw nila basahin. Kasi ang fractured ng grammar, ang clumsy ng sulat. Yung sa start, eventually gumaling sila eh. Alam mo, nung unang beses ako nag-ask who wants to read their work in front, everyone wanted to read in front. Everyone wanted to go to the front and read their work. No one was folding, you know. They wanted. Then I realized, oh my gosh, these are children who never had their drawings stuck in refrigerators by their parents. Alam mo yung mga tiny accomplishments mo kasi sina-scotch tape na ng mami mo sa wall. Ngayon, Diyos ko, ina-announce sa Facebook kahit 7th place sa spelling. Ano ba? Di ba? And parang, ito yung mga, nung bata sila, walang shape. Walang shape yung earth. Ganon. So now that they're in prison, at 8 o'clock they're counted, Counted meaning bilang. 1, 2, 3, count off talaga. At 9 o'clock, they know they have chores. 12 o'clock, alam nila magkaka-food, whether from their padron or the commissary. Alam nila 1:30, gusto na mag-tennis ni Congressman Alos. So may order. Like for the first time in their lives, may schedule. And sad or not, that's comforting for them. Parang for the first time, I belong somewhere. Ito yung mga, siguro wala silang parents, parang a lot of them change their names inside. And you know this, they have nicknames, change their names inside for many reasons. I think because when they start to belong to a gang, they're named, Kulot, Taba, Tisoy, whatever, Niwang, ganyan. So they have nicknames. And it becomes their name. Bunso, I have a student named Bunso. It becomes their name, and then it becomes their apelido also, because that's the family they belong to. Because you don't know, we take for granted the comfort that somebody named us. Our moms named us, our fathers named us. That no matter what your family setup is, somebody cared enough to name you, and saw you through, gave you a nickname. Because there's always affection, even if it's Taba. There's affection. Even if your nickname is Negro or Kulot, alam mong may lambing doon. And that's the first time they felt that, And anthropologically, I think if you study everybody in jail, it really goes back to absence of parenting, walang schedule, walang bahay, walang bubong, walang inuwian na pareho every day, walang repetition. And you know how comforting repetition is. Now, for those naman who are wealthy and free and resourceful, resource-full, when they get to jail, the repetition is killing them. The rote-like motion of the small space and the repetition of the schedule is the one that kills the ones who are rich. But the ones who come from nothing, repetition is their comfort. So it's really grabe yung disparity, no?
But then you're talking about the majority who in many ways are there because these are not habitual criminals, are you saying?
A lot of them are, of course, but a lot of them one time, big time. I know one. He was working in the city hall. He passed away already. He very prominent family in Baguio, and he murdered the neighbor because the neighbor caught him on a bad day and made a super snide comment about his marriage.
And he went berserk.
He went berserk and shot her. Okay, and these are prominent families. In fact, when he died, we returned, because I'm always in Baguio, we were the ones who returned his ashes to Baguio, to his family. We had to look for his family, and then look for the wife.
Okay, but then so all things being fair, where then is the sort of intersection between the authorities who are trying to maintain order and the kingpins, inside who, if you're a wealthy and well-connected person whose world has shrunk to a jail cell, you can lead to empire building in there because you have no other
space.
And it's not done by pakiusap.
Nope. No, not at all. No, the language is not pakiusap. The language, of course, we're Filipino.
Is it favors or is it violence or is it?
It's the sheer intimidation, energy intimidation. You've seen JB Sebastian interviewed on TV. It's very imposing, facial expression. It's a balor. It's a Tagalog balor. I think in English the direct translation is demeanor.
But here's an interesting point, Gang. Here's an interesting point, Gang. The rumors you're saying of threat, but okay, for most of the public, they have seen these guys on TV.
Yeah.
So walk us through, maybe contrast, maybe a character sketch of these guys and contrast it with what are we seeing or not seeing. Because these are larger than life personalities.
Now they are, yeah. But I don't know if you can imagine, but first of all, the physical space they're allowed to move in is way smaller than the regular human beings, right? Yeah, we can fly to Thailand tomorrow if we want to do, and they're just there. And think especially of for example, my friends from UP Diliman, who have the same awareness level of us, as us, read the same books, went through the same curriculum, possibly had the same background with their families because they got to UP Diliman, to UP Manila. Can you imagine? All of a sudden, ito na lang yung space nila. That's why I will sound really biased here, but I know them very well. The 5 UP boys, I really want to hand it to them. They lead inside, they really do, but they organize the alternative classes. They facilitate my permits. I know they have a lot of time in their board. That's why, parang it's something to do then. They really take care of their quote-unquote people. I hate using that, but that's really what they are. People who work with them, help them with their laundry, help them with company, help them with the classes, itong 5. Ibang brand of leadership nung mga taga-UP na nakita ko sila talagang they ask me and say, uy, si Edwin na-diagnose ng ganito prostate cancer and walang medicine. Can you help us find? And then I have to puzzle it inside.
Okay, but contrast that with
contrast
the
that
JBs
with the other,
and the
with the
Bolancos.
JB I've seen, JB and Colanco, I've never seen them naman violent or even, why would I see anybody snort? People keep asking me if I've seen drugs inside. Of course I haven't. But are there rumors? Yeah, but I can't say I have seen. But sila iba, parang it's about them. Tama ba yun? Parang they really use Colango say, attorney ang resibo, di ba? Parang ganon. And he's not lying. I mean, that's really braggadosyo. That's really his personality, panache, and then kinontain mo, and then may megalomanic tendencies to, and may creative juice flow pa. Belief niya artist siya.
But how do they get away with that larger than life personality inside a prison space where everyone
is as siga as them?
Yes, and they can beat him up. I mean, how does he impose that?
Okay, you're right. Colanco's not very big, di ba?
Yeah,
Pwede siyang ma-beat up. Pero he surrounds himself with meron siyang bodyguards. Kahit naman si Hubert Payat, di ba? Pero nobody ever really bothered with him in prison. But yeah, they have people around them. Pero ganun din, dahil may kaya sila. So napapakain nila.
Yeah, but this is interesting what you were saying about Colanco. So, are you saying that we should distinguish that, okay, when he says something and we're watching him on TV, we should believe that he totally believes what he says.
Think so.
Okay,
he's not
but that's
lying,
different from saying that what he's saying is factually true.
That's very different, yeah.
So
yeah,
there is a difference.
You know your friend who has a cast in let's say nabalian siya ng elbow and he says, I fractured my elbow skydiving, pero actually natisod lang siya sa stairs. Parang may pagkaganon sila di ba? Pinapalaki nila. I'm not, please to be clear, I'm not saying he's lying. Not at all. That's really how the reality is inside In fact, I don't know. Baka talagang may interaction siya with the Limas driver. Baka talaga namang nagsesend siya ng 3 million. I don't know. Pero pag tinanong mo ako papapusta, parang hindi ako makapusta Kasi I've seen a lot of them fib.
Which goes back to what you were saying earlier, that prison is a place where reality is warped and people go a little crazy, and it's
to say the least,
yeah.
Iba yung hangin.
Okay, what's the definition of a psychopath? A psychopath is a person who's is very charming, very articulate.
Sociopath yun.
Sociopath, di ba?
Pero
is very convincing but
feelings.
has no
pathos,
feelings and no sort of moral bearings,
no
right?
concern for the other.
Would you describe some of these kingpin? Is that a sort of a type?
I don't know if, first of all, that needs a professional to do that.
Or is it more troubling that no one can give an answer?
No one can give an answer. Pero if you line up some of their crimes, some of them are serving 7 lifetimes, So maybe during those times that they were committing those crimes that they're accused of and convicted of, there can be a great assumption that either they are sociopathic or they were on something that wired their brains far from the statistical norm behavior. But I mean, I can't judge. Pero I'm very sure, a lot of the crimes were committed During flip moments, if somebody is bipolar, walang healthcare, under duress, siguro namatayan ng parent at the time. Like I said, bagong break nga lang kung ano-anong katangahan pwede mong gawin. Heartbroken ka lang eh, di ba? You can cross logic just being heartbroken. Can you imagine this? The demographic, they're not just lucky enough to go to school. They don't have a community. There's no parents. There's no support. They don't know where the next meal will come from. And then they're having a bad day. And you twist this to another gender. Let's make it female. Then they have hormones. Then they have menopause happening. So you can really commit crime, I think, if your mental health is not in check.
Okay, it's safe to assume that you're only there for a limited period whenever you do an outreach and you're teaching a class. But
legally 1 to 4. Minsan nakakalagpas ako ng 4:15.
Clinton was pointing out, but the rest of the time, 21 hours of the day when you're not there, that congressman who has ball boys for when he feels like playing tennis, Agulamco who's great, making a music video, is presiding over
some collective
some collective that how are they enforcing it? I mean, we really need to see. I mean, your ordinary criminal, I mean, who is there and thriving because at least they know their place in the world now.
Yeah.
But they have to do things. So what is the sort of the range? I mean, from making laba, we saw that, diba? Laba,
Luto,
magsilbi,
hindi siya ganun
sing to the
kasimple.
person.
Hindi siya ganun kasimple. Every gang, hindi ako 100% dito, pero I'll venture. Like I'll try based on what I've seen. Please, someone correct me if you're listening and put a comment or something on this podcast. Meron silang organization chart inside. Merong mayor, merong deputy mayor within the gang or by building, and then merong bastonero. Bastonero is
self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. Merong may mga terms sila eh. Oo, yun ganon. Bastonero, mayor, merong sub-guard, merong liaison pa to the guard. I forgot the term kasi Visayan term yan. May roles sila, halos parang may officers, may execo.
It's an army.
It's an army. It's an org. It's like ISEC. Parang may execom. Ganun, may execom sila. And they have zones of areas of responsibility. Like, for example, may magsuntukan sa basketball game. Idadalin sila sa mayor. Yung mayor, pag may oras siya yung mag-decide, may jury of peers. And then, nakita ko to sa La Union Jail kasi I've visited over 27 places, institutions, jails and prisons. Nakita ko sa La Union na meron silang dadalhin sa mayor yung dalawang nagsuntukan, ba't kayo nagsuntukan, sinong nag-start. And then, dadalhin sa bastonero. Tapos magde-decide kung ilan palo, like paddles for frats, ganyan. Minsan, hindi sila magde-decide ng frat kasi may constitution na sila. Pag basketball, ang suntukan, 5. Pag ganyan, may dugo, 10. Pag baldado at kailangan i-hospital yung isa, 20, and isolation and no food. They have their own
and all of this
justice
just
system.
Was self-organized and it just emerged organically.
This is generations. I think generations of inmates already. Kasi yung pinuntahan kong jail na nakita ko to sa La Union, parang noon pa sila may almost unspoken, understood 10 canings or 10 palo if you get someone else's food, mga ganon. This is so funny. Parang silang may sharia, is that what they call it? Parang silang may sariling law. Meron pa nga silang heinous crime inside. May considered heinous crime ng agaw ng bisita. It means you occupy the time of somebody who visited somebody else. Nag-agaw ng girlfriend, syempre, or wife. Yun, talaga, sa kanila, yun, parang pedophilia yung level nun sa punishment inside. For me, kasi, pinaka-heinous for me, kasi pedophilia, sorry, in my head, so that's just the analogy I use. So, they do have to come up with their own system. It's so necessary, kasi you have to have some order.
Again, this brings me to the last part because
Sure.
I think it's very important. In general, I think it's safe to say that our society views jail as punishment. It is not for rehabilitation. It is not to give people a second chance.
Punishment and isolating them from people they can harm pa. Parang ganyan.
Punishment and quarantine.
Quarantine,
right?
yeah.
The rest of the world views it as a means of reintegration into society.
Rehab so they can go back into society.
Right? You have a case where the resources are simply not there. A, because I think of this point of view that no one wants to spend money for people who are supposed to be having a miserable time. That's also why no improvement to facilities can take place. And I think there's this very characteristic thing in official circles in our country. To invest in prisons, to improve facilities is an admission of failure and therefore cannot be tolerated. I mean, that's my point of view, right? So, on the other hand, the system itself is so bogged down that people waiting for parole or who have even been paroled sometimes wait years and years before they get finally notified.
Yes.
The trial period takes forever, and sometimes.
Do we know how much do we spend per prisoner?
I only know the food budget. 50 pesos per inmate per day. I only know the food. I don't know everything else. I'm glad you brought up the system as a whole. Kasi I have experienced inmates where 2 years already, they've been inside jail 2 years in the then called the BBRC, Bagong Buhay Rehab Center in Cebu. I think it's now the IT park. They tore it down. 2 years na sa jail, hindi pa na-arraign. And you know what arraign is? Arraign is when they tell you what you did. You are accused of, di ba? 2 years na. And I said, how come, paano ka umabot ng 2 years and hindi ka na-arraign? Wala akong lawyer. So, we looked at the statistics of public attorneys, yung office that provides legal service for those who can't afford their own lawyers. And as of sorry, my stats are 2007 pa. I hope you update and Google this. But I know my numbers of 2007 to 2008 because that was when we were doing the documentary. There are 2,261 courts in the whole Philippines, 7107 islands, okay? And there's only 1,024 public attorneys. At that time, 07, that was under Rueda Acosta na yan. So, which means every public attorney takes care of 2 salas. Right? Okay, now picture salas, meaning courts, mga 18 to 22% walang judge. Kasi walang nagpapa-appoint, kinakabahan. Kasi the Leon local politics is so crazy. If you're appointed in a dynasty-driven district and you're a judge, you're mostly in danger if you're a good judge, if you're a just judge. So, ang daming hindi pumapayag ma-appoint sa regional trial courts. Meaning, ang daming sala na walang judge.
Add to that, the lack of judges was that this was a problem that was faced was you don't want to fill them because the budget then can be divided up by the rest of the judiciary as bonuses.
Yes.
So I mean, which is really the most selfish.
You're right. They're not aggressively searching then. But ako, mas pessimistic yung view ko. Parang walang nag-yes. Walang nag-yes maging judge sa hinterland parts of Davao del Sur or wherever it is, you know, or Maguindanao, especially Sheriff Aga. Ang daming empty salas doon. So, anong effect nito? I'm an inmate. My court date is October 3. I get there, wala yung judge. Bakit? Kasi nag-conference, may continuing education program ang Supreme Court. Tama naman yun. Pero pag nilipat ako sa kabilang court naman, busy yung public attorneys doon kasi konti lang sila. So, hindi aabot, magpa 5 o'clock, uuwi. Ang next round ng court appearance ko 6 months from now or 4 months from now. And then ito pa yun. Do you think the wardens are super thoughtful that they'll remind the inmates, trial mo next week? They don't. You're on your own. And if you're not literate, kung yung inmate hindi literate, hindi masyadong smart, hindi nakapag-aral, hindi rin niya maiintindihan kung kailan yung court date niya. Okay, so saan sila umaasa? Sa family, sa asawa, sa cousin, sa brother who will be kind enough to watch over their case and say, Kuya, may trial ka next Thursday. At siya yung magsasabi sa warden, yung kuya ko may trial sa Thursday. Ano sasabihin ng warden? ay kailangan namin panggas ng fiera to transport them. Kung walang pera, di ba? So, then they stay again for another 6 months to wait for their jail. That's why pahaba ng pahaba. The worst, and this is real, this is fact, the worst story I've ever heard is a jail in La Union. It was at the foot of, sa may Ago, I forget where it is. But anyway, I remember it's La Union in my notes. 17 years siya sa jail. And nagnakaw siya ng metal nung Meralco, yung wires, okay? 17 years. And then I said, tapos ba? Like, na-convict ka ba? Nakapunta ka sa... Bakit ang tagal? Sabi niya, ang dami kasing delay sa trial ko. Ano yung sentence mo? 4 years lang yung sentence niya. Pero nagstay siya sa jail 17 years. And then I said, released ka na pala. Manong, ba't nandito ka pa? Nagtatrabaho na lang ako sa kitchen. Ayaw na niya umalis. Nagstay na siya doon. Inabsorb siya ng commissary ng La Union Jail. So, head cook siya doon sa jail. And feeling ko pa, may utang na sa'yo yung lipunan. Pwede ka pang magnakaw ng 4 na cellphone, isang kotse, tapos cool ka na, quits tayo, na-serve mo na. We laugh right now because Filipinos, we laugh when we're overwhelmed by feeling, by disgust or even pain, di ba? Or even pity. So natatawa na lang ako. And siya parang, di ako makapaniwala na he just accepted it. So I go further into the anthro part of it. I said, how can he accept just this? Why is he not outraged? Why is he not suing the Philippine government for wrongful, blah, 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 blah. 1, wala naman siyang knowledge na pwede niyang gawin yun. 2, wala siyang lawyer. Saan siya kukuha? 3, hindi naman siya na-cover ng news enough for a group to be outraged behind him and sign petitions. This is La Union. Who cares? Parang he's just an ordinary guy in La Union. And then thirdly, he's exhausted. And fourth, family na niya yung jail. Andun na siya. And then last, and I think this is really crucial, because he's born again already, he thinks it's the way of the Lord to teach him a lesson. Because perhaps he wasn't such a good kid or something, right? Now, I brought that up because I have very many inmate students who said, Ma'am, alam mo, na-jail ako na for the crime I didn't commit. But because I knew I stole 3 years back, I'm thinking, hinahabol lang ako ng karma and finally I'm caught and I'm in jail. So I'm just serving this sentence kasi I did something before. Like Rowan, that's his name. He was accused alongside Paco Laranaga.
So there's a lot of this fatalism.
Yes, yeah. Okay. I know. For example, I hope it's okay that I use his name. Rowan, his contention is, and he could be lying, he was co-accused of Paco Laranaga, Cebu. He swears that he doesn't really know Paco. He wasn't there. He was accused to be the driver or whatever. But sabi niya sa akin, pero ma'am, alam mo, ang dami ko na rin bugbog before. Meron nga ako isa accidentally, napatay ko ata, pero hindi ako sure. Pero 16 ako noon or 17. So, blacklisted na rin ako sa police. So ngayon, dinakip nila ako, inaccuse nila ako with the Chong sisters, Slay, along with Paco. His name is Rowan. He's still there. And then he said, pero alam mo, tinanggap ko na lang kasi parang baka yun yung divine justice, baka yun yung... And for me, half of me wanted to tell him, they should get you for the crime you actually committed. I mean, if you think of justice in the most antiseptic, scientific way, you convict someone of the actual crime that he did. You don't say because 3 years ago he did something, so let's get him for this and falsely accuse him. But even the inmates themselves accept that. So I don't know
internalized that.
I don't know if that's a religion thing or it's a way of surviving na lang the circumstance. Because you've seen, for example, O.J. Simpson get away with because that's not my glove or that kulang yung DNA and you're almost sure shit it's them. But but they get away because there is a science to justice. There is a measure to justice. There is math to justice.
Let's go broader. Let's say you're given the wand, you're given the power, you're given the president takes you aside and said, how can we correct our criminal justice system? How would you start?
I'll really start with law enforcement, equip them more, train them more. You from the point of arrest, I think. From the point of arrest. I think that's where it all starts. So that also brings to surface optimizing technology for, not so much in a Big Brother invasive way, but certainly more lights sa street. Ang simple nun, ilaw lang sa kalye, di ba? Less dark alleys, less crime. Okay, ganun kasimple yun. But no, we shave off budgets from our, some of them are accused of stealing from the budgets of public street lighting, and then you have sub-quality lights, and then you have all these streets na dilim-dilim, uuwi yung mga dalawang koleyala, dilim. Alam mo, it's so, the range is fantastic because it's from something as simple as just lighting up your streets, to CCTV, perhaps, and in the public places, of course, to training law enforcement to actually be present or actually have the right number of people, ratio of law enforcement per barangay, and the actual correct training. Pwede naman konti lang yung police, pero para silang SWAT, o pwede rin yun, di ba? And then you can invest in modernizing equipment. This is so funny. I talked to a policeman before who was visiting a friend. He's a policeman, and then he said, hirap na hirap kami maghuli ng carnapper dati kasi ang bagal-bagal nung Corolla namin, ang ninakaw Ferrari. So, tawang-tawa ako sa kwento na yon kasi, oo nga naman, ang kinarnap Ferrari, kahit nakita nila in broad daylight, di nila mahabol kasi nag-NLEX.
No, and even looking at the list of crimes, I mean, if there was a effort over the past few years to come up with a new penal code, because our list of crimes is really something out of Les Miserables. It's you'll be put in jail for 4 years if you steal a loaf of bread, or if you bruise a chicken, you'll get 6 months in jail. I mean, it was really built from a different era.
It's from the Spanish.
It's from the Spanish and really positively medieval. And
may offending religious feelings nga eh. Yeah.
And in modern societies, it's either done through fines or community surveys, or not everything has to land you in jail to rectify your offense to society. So
I think
but then it's bogged down and doesn't seem to have gotten far.
Yeah, I think state as parent. If you view the state as parent, and you rule by fear, like if you do this, you go to jail, and jail is awful, right? That's lazy. I think that's very lazy. It works, it's faster, it's cheaper, but I think it's lazy in terms of really making your citizens self-actualize, go through the process of, I know it sounds really ideal, but I think that's a goal. I don't expect it to happen even in the next generation, but I think it's a worthy goal to get there, again, 100 years from now. I don't expect it now, but I certainly want a state that actually is not lazy when it comes to facing the complexities of human behavior. I think everybody should give it some fighting chance to have a good life or self-actualize wherever. And we do that with, however, again, I say the range is from something so basic as ilaw in the street to something as complex as counseling and therapy.
Mental health, you were saying.
Yung mental health talaga, we don't explore it enough, I think.
Which affects so many things. I mean, ranging from preventing crimes against people like rape and things like that, to even handling addiction, because there's such a stigma to getting counseling or being, seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Naisip ko nga yung mga karamihan ng estudyante ko, kasi I can't speak for the whole population, yung mga kilala ko ng ilang taon na, parang ang dami sa kanila could have led really productive lives if they just had someone to talk to when transitions were happening. Transition meaning nagbibinata or during the time where you're so volatile, there was no one there to keep them steady. And now they're writing it and etc. And I'm observing them. And the heartache for me really is parang, wow, ang galing nitong taong to. Parang sayang hindi na parent, or it's heartbreaking actually to see some of the potential citizens untapped and just isolated, just quarantined away. I think it will take at least 100 more years, at least. But people always ask me, why are you teaching in prison? Do you want to know? Parang no, none of you asked me why I'm teaching in prison. But I want to say it. First, we were asked to make a documentary by the Asia Foundation and a group called Libertas on the congestions of congestion lang. Ang theory ko, congested dahil walang lawyer. Ang theory ni Tado, the late Tado, who did the documentary with us also, is because they enjoy it inside because of the system. So he covered the gangs and how anthropologically men always need tribes. So they kind of like it inside. Lourdes de Vera has a documentary also, but he focused more on food. On the food. And then Pepe Diokno, who was very young at that time, 17, he focused on the dancing inmates in Cebu. So we have 4 10-minute documentaries on it. We weren't allowed to shoot inside Maximum. But all the other jails kasi are under governors, mayors, so it was easier to go through the League of Mayors, League of Governors, pinapayagan kami. Sa Maximum, hindi kami pinayagan magpasok ng camera or bumisita. So we came up with the UP inmates inside na, let's hold an alternative class day so that I can go inside. And Renato Puno was Chief Justice at the time, and he was so delighted with the idea, like, because I think he's evangelical, I think he's very Christian, and visiting prisons is a corporal act of mercy. Yeah. So we went through that route. And I said, Sir, Chief Justice, we would like to hold alternative classes in Maximum Prison. And he goes, what do you mean? Well, we're RACED, and we have Ronnie Lazaro and Soliman Cruz will hold theater workshops. We have Diego Mapa who will hold a songwriting workshop. I will hold the creative writing workshop. We have hip-hop dancers who will come in and help with hip-hop, blah, 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 blah. And so we did. So, at that time, the one in charge is Mayor Sanchez. Then he says, my lucky number is 7. This is a true story. So I wanted to hold it on July 7, 2007. That's why I really know the first day I've been in Maximum. 777, I'm like, sabi ko, ano ba yun? Fiesta ba yun? Or, I mean, is it, para lang we know kung may theme. Hindi, favorite number lang niya yung 7. Ako naman, okay. So, we gave our permits, we were allowed. So, we were all allowed inside. Finally, we were right then and there. I told the director, Sir, sayang kung hindi natin mapicturan. Kasi ang ganda ng program, baka other people would want to volunteer and help as well. So, pinayagan ako magpasok ng camera. So, nakashoot ako sa loob. So, it was really just paraan. It was really UP Diliman style of paraan. And then when we got, after the day of classes, lahat ng estudyante were saying, salamat, and then, kailan kayo babalik? Ganyan. And I was like, oh my God, kailan kayo babalik? Never, di ba? Kasi, kailangan ko lang ng footage. Tapos, lahat pa kami ganito while we were teaching. I'd actually look at Tado from the other side and I'll say, nako mo yung footage. We were not into it. But the classes happened. You know, the acting workshop happened. There were culminations after. There were skits and dance numbers, etc. Then we leave and we're all exhausted. We're all good friends. And we said, okay, nakuha natin yung footage. Yay, high five. The following week, Chief Justice through Maidas Marquez said, oh, I really like your program. I heard you're teaching, present tense, in prison. Alam ko, one time lang yun. Ayoko naman bumalik. Di ko naman game plan yun. We want to give you a blanket permit, sabi ni Chief Justice. Sabi ko, blanket permit for what? You can teach freely in and out, for a year. And I was like, teka, parang gift certificate ba yun? Ano ba to? Am I supposed to be happy? So I got the permit anyway, but I had no plans. But then I said, we should go back at least once and say thank you for the footage and the stories. And ayaw mo naman kasi gumawa ng documentary, kasi parang, can I cuss? Tapos parang prostitute mo lang yung story nila. Parang pinuta mo lang yung story nila and then you leave. So sabi ko, sige, balik tayo. July yun. Remember, July 7, 2007. I said, uy, birthday ko sa August. Doon tayo mag-world premiere ng documentaries natin kasi by that time, tapos na yung editing. So the first time it was ever shown was inside the prison. So it's a premiere. And then we will bring in the Don, kapatid, Carl Roy. The late Carl Roy wanted to come in with us. He had all these tattoos and he was like, I want to see my people. So pasok siya. So during the first Rock the Rehas, we called it, because we needed to give it a name, the Don, Radioactive Sago Project, and kapatid under Carl Roy went in with us to play. Diego Mapa, another artist, was the host that night. So we were all there. So we showed it. So, pero yun. August, that was the following month. Then all of a sudden, I think I'm free on Wednesdays. Sige na, I'll go back and teach at least just one class. And 9 years has passed and we're still back. We still teach. It expanded. In 2010, we were joined by Lex Ledesma, who is more in charge of it now than I am. See, Lex Ledesma is in charge of classes now, but he goes on Saturdays. I go on Wednesdays.
But Gang, I guess on the final question, in the past, about you're talking about classes and that sort of thing. So there's hope. But 50 years ago, the inmates in these penitentiaries were, for example, making government furniture. They were earning a livelihood and that sort of thing.
Right.
They're, in all the stories you're telling me, they are just contained and kept there, and there's no effort where they can either earn a proper
You're right,
livelihood
you're
or
right.
learn a trade. That seems to have vanished.
No, I'm sorry. Meron may
Meron.
painting na, and then they have exhibits in the GSIS building and some of them sell. Meron din naman, but you're right, it's not as symbiotic or walang ecosystem na pabalik. You're right, hindi katulad dati furniture talaga and you know, those ships in bottles and stuff. Meron pa rin konti, ganyan.
But it's not, that
it's
seems
not,
to have
because
really...
I blame it on the change of leadership all the time, change of rhythm all the time. There's not one that continued, but there is an alternative learning system. Thank God for DepEd. They have that. So part of my class is preparing them for their high school diploma equivalency test. And I have one favorite student, his name is Tonyo, and we in fact gave him an award, Outstanding OSY Award. He couldn't read when I first met him in 2007. And then he passed his high school exam in 2014. So, you know, parang, for me, reward ko yun. Reward namin yun, yung may nakita kang ganun na learning curve or etc. And there's no conscious, noble desire on my part to keep going back. It's just that you develop relationships with them. It has become a habit. All I need to spend naman is gas and time. Emotionally, you get exhausted, especially when in 2009 I had 2 friends who were murdered. It's the first time I encountered such an experience, and I hope nobody ever goes through it. And then I really stopped teaching for 3 months just to regroup my brain, because I'm thinking, those who murdered my friends, Alexis and Nika, they're the same as my students. So nag-pause talaga. It's also a lot of learning for me. Can you imagine, this is education you can't get anywhere else. This is education you can't get unless you said yes to decisions every week to go back and go back and go back and learn. Yung environment sa jail, this might sound utilitarian, tama? This may sound like I'm using them, but I really learn about the human condition and human behavior. And I'm a student of that. And I really learn to appreciate my freedom. I make it work to my advantage. Every time I drive out of Muntinlupa, I really feel free. Meaning the music on the radio sounds 10 times better than it did this morning. The appreciation of I can roll down my window and have a cigarette in the car while driving, grabe. All of a sudden, my sense of life is different. Kasi, and I always ask this, you who are free, what are you doing with your life, you know? You haven't seen people who are not free. You know, and if you haven't, you don't know how free you are. And the minute you get to that state of mind, it's all about freedom, and then you get to live your life really. So technically, if you ask me, I was really, ang cliche nito, kadire, but I'll say it, I was really their student. More than they were mine, or more than ako yung teacher. I know people have appreciated our work, they've lauded, oh galing, you teach in prison. Pero, ang selfish nga ng reasons ko for going to prison eh. Kasi grabe yung enrichment, grabe yung natututunan ko, grabe how grateful I am. Every day of my life na meron akong aso, may asawa ko, may bahay kami, parang mga nakakalimutan mo. So technically, I'm really all the richer for it. So, I appreciate the appreciation of what we do inside, but it needs to be said. Alexis Ledesma and I and all the other teachers and all the volunteers and musicians who have been inside prison, I think we are all kinder, smarter, richer, for all the better for it, because we witnessed what they're going through. You know?
Okay, actually, I wanted to ask.
Sorry, did I overtalk?
No. If we have,
obviously, it's something I feel very strongly about.
If we have listeners who would want to volunteer with Rock Ed Philippines, how would they go about doing that?
Well, if it's in prison, we have to wait for our permits again. First, that's really, I don't know what kind of process that will entail because of the SAF 44. Right now, we're a standby disaster relief team for sure. So we're like firemen. You know, we play billiards the rest of the time, and then we're active when there's a storm. But may I say something like to my final thoughts about this? Kasi I'm so grateful you took the time out to ask. Nobody really asks about our work in prison, you know. They're more interested in the concerts, in the, is John Lloyd volunteering, ganyan. So I'm so grateful that this podcast invited us about prison because I have this dream, and I think I'll just immortalize it here on this podcast. I have this dream that when I'm 100 years old, or possibly dead, that they can look back and say, there was a group of people that did not stop going back to prison, even if they could have, because that group thought even criminals deserve education, even criminals need to pass the time with some learning and see some sort of kindness, even if we're not really that kind. It's just in the form of donuts and a lesson and a lesson plan. Because if you say that criminals who are the worst of us deserve education and donuts, then you raise the bar for everybody else. What more the unemployed who are good citizens naman? What more the women who are not criminals, but they're not. So parang yun yung pinakamababang line eh. So parang I think us for 9 years teaching in prison is just one poetic gesture that says, let's lift the lowest bar. Parang let's lift the lowest bar. Therefore, Filipinos deserve more education, more budgets in health, more welfare. Their welfare has to be foremost. Kasi nga, kung ang inmates nga dapat alagaan din, ano pa kaya yung hindi kriminal, di ba? Ano pa kaya yung ordinaryong Pilipino lang na nagko-contribute naman? So, I like to imagine, it might sound really, really grandiose. I like to imagine we raised a bar somewhere by doing what we've done, and hopefully we still get our permit to keep doing it. So, there.
Right. So, thank you so much, Gang, for taking some time to talk to us today. We'll include links to Rocket Philippines with this podcast so that people can keep themselves updated on what you guys are up to in your outreach programs.
I always encourage other people to do their own in their prisons where they are in the provinces, not just maximum. I just need to warn, because I do not want it not said. One of the reasons why we taught in maximum is because their sentences are long. They're not released in 2 years or 3 years. When they are released in 2 or 3 years, I imagine the burden of finding jobs for them will be on me, and I don't know if I'm equipped to do that yet in the rehab. And so don't teach in jail. Kasi minsan 1 year naka-release na yung inmate, baka hanapin ka, ikaw yung obligahin to find a job. Why? Because we have no law or no provision for halfway houses for newly released inmates. We have no provision for a parole system. Alam mo yung sa Amerika, yung every week tinatawagan ng police, anong ginawa mo this week? Wala tayong ganon. So if a legislator is listening, please come up with something like that. So that I don't caution volunteers na, huwag kayo magturo sa jail kasi baka ma-release sila in 2 years, hanapin ka. That's why we're so limited to maximum, kasi 12 to life yun eh. So, we're not in any danger of a newly released inmate demanding for a job from us, putting us in a position that's a bit awkward and, it's a bit tricky. You're not really sure. Of course, you believe in the kindness of humans, but that's a convict. You don't want them around your nephew or your children. So, ayaw mong lagay sa alanganin yung volunteer. And nakakainis, di ba? Because our society doesn't encourage compassion. Because
this is back to the idea of is there rehabilitation, and
that even went on, no? Parang na-quarantine lang sila. Oo nga eh. Pero I have to laud the churches who go inside, the ministers, all the denominations that are actually active inside. There is a Buddhist temple inside. I think Victory has inside. There's a Catholic church inside, a mosque. So there are several churches or faith leanings that come in and really try to give them some sort of direction. We're not religious. I'm not religious. So I just go to provide science classes, creative writing, and etc. And the equivalency for a high school diploma. Even if they're not gonna be released anyway or be employed, I think it just gives them some sense of dignity that they finished high school kahit nasa loob sila. That's all you can give them. Wow, I think that's a lot.
Yeah. So that's it for this week's podcast. Thanks for listening.